On a Thursday night in 2010, Liu Jun, a 24-year-old surgical resident working at the county hospital in Shaozhou, Hunan Province, China, wasn't feeling well and had called in sick for the day. Around 9 p.m., his phone rang. After taking the call, he briefly told his parents, "I'm going out for a bit," grabbed his phone, stepped out the door, and vanished into the night. As the night wore on and the clock struck midnight, Mr. Liu Jun's father, stopped by his son's room to check on him out of habit. But when he opened the door and looked inside, all he saw was an empty bed with the sheets and blankets still neatly arranged as they had been that afternoon. He didn't think much of it, assuming his son simply hadn't returned yet. At 2 a.m., when he woke to use the bathroom, he passed by his son's room again, and the scene was exactly the same. The room completely empty, not a soul in sight. At this point, a vague sense of unease began to creep over him. Liu Jun had been born and raised in this area. He'd always been an obedient child with a calm temperament and excellent discipline. He rarely stayed out late, and he certainly never spent the night away from home without informing his family beforehand. The next morning, when 10 a.m. passed with still no sign of his son, Mr. Liu became genuinely worried and decided to call Liu Jun's phone. The call went through and rang normally, but no matter how long he waited, no one picked up. He called repeatedly with the same result, just the hollow ringing echoing before dying out. Unable to reach his son, he called the hospital where Liu Jun worked to inquire. The hospital reported that Liu Jun hadn't come to work that day and hadn't called in sick or notified anyone. Liu Jun had only been working for 2 years, but he was always extremely careful, responsible, and serious about his work. For him to be absent without reason or permission like this was virtually impossible given his character. At this point, Mr. Liu realized his son might have encountered serious trouble. Without another moment's hesitation, Mr. Liu immediately called all of Liu Jun's friends and colleagues, whose numbers he had, asking about his son's whereabouts. But everyone gave the same answer. No one had seen Liu Jun the day before. The worry in his heart grew steadily. He began thinking about the worst possibilities. Could his son have been in a traffic accident? With that thought, he hurriedly called a relative who worked in the traffic police to ask for help checking. However, this friend reported that there had been no traffic accidents with casualties in the area over the past few days. That entire day, Mr. Liu could barely do anything except continuously dial his son's phone number. He stared at the screen, dialing, waiting. No one answered. Over and over again. By late afternoon, Liu Jun's phone stopped ringing altogether and went straight to being powered off. Just as he sat there feeling like he was on hot coals, his phone rang. On the other end was Liu Jun's department head from the hospital. The supervisor informed him that the department had just received a text message requesting leave from Liu Jun's phone number. Hearing this, Mr. Liu quickly asked the supervisor to call that number back to verify, but the phone was now off and unreachable. This contradictory situation made everyone feel that something was very wrong. The more people thought about it, the more chilling it felt. By early morning the next day, Liu Jun had been missing for 2 full days and nights with no news. The situation was becoming increasingly serious. Mr. Liu hurriedly called his daughter who worked in the city, asking her to come home immediately. At the same time, he mobilized 20 or 30 relatives and close family friends to split up and search every corner of the small town of Jiahe. The town wasn't particularly large, so the search party walked back and forth on those familiar streets, asking people as they went, posting missing person flyers with Liu Jun's photo on every wall and utility pole. Before long, those white flyers flooded every street in town, but disappointingly, despite their exhausting search, they couldn't find even one significant clue. As soon as the critical 48-hour window since the disappearance had passed, Mr. Liu didn't hesitate any longer and immediately went to the police station to officially report his son's disappearance. After hearing him recount the entire sequence of events, the police officers also noticed many suspicious and unusual points in this case. According to the hospital's strict regulations, surgical doctors must keep their phones on 24/7 so they can be contacted and called in at any time for emergency surgeries. Yet in Liu Jun's case, he didn't show up for work. His phone was completely powered off, but a leave request text message was sent sometime in between. It was hard to believe this was simply a case of a young person running away from home in the usual manner. Recognizing the seriousness of the situation, police immediately opened an official case file and asked the family to continue expanding the search radius in surrounding areas while the police began their investigation. Time continued to pass, and on the fourth day since Liu Jun's disappearance, just as everyone in the family and search party was frantically busy, rushing around everywhere, Mr. Liu suddenly received a text message from Liu Jun. He hurriedly opened it to look, but saw only 3 brief words. "I'm very tired." Those 3 simple words made Mr. Liu feel as if his entire body had frozen in place. As the father who had raised his son since childhood, he knew Liu Jun's tone, mannerisms, and speech patterns far too well. He was certain that the way of expressing things in this text message was completely unlike his son's normal style of communication. It seemed more like a sentence someone had deliberately fabricated and faked. His heart felt heavy, a sense of foreboding rising. Very likely someone else was holding his phone. He immediately dialed that phone number back at once, but it was still powered off and couldn't connect. News of this mysterious text message immediately set everyone talking, offering all sorts of different theories. Some worried whether Liu Jun had been kidnapped, but others argued back that the Liu family were just ordinary working people with stable income, but not wealthy by any means. There was no reason why a kidnapping gang would target a family like this. While everyone was fumbling with all kinds of speculation, suddenly someone remembered and brought up another possibility. Could Liu Jun have gone to find his ex-girlfriend Hu Fang? The two had been in love since their school days up until now. Calculating it out, it had been 7 or 8 years. Recently there were rumors they had broken up, but who could be sure they weren't still seeing each other privately? Hearing Hu Fang mentioned, Mr. Liu initially denied it right away, explaining that the parents from both sides had formally sat down together to discuss the breakup of the 2 young people. After that conversation, the 2 families had reached a clear agreement. The groom's family would give the girl 10,000 yuan, approximately $1,400, as emotional compensation for the years they'd spent together, and from then on the 2 sides would no longer be in contact. But after calming down and thinking more carefully, looking at the current deadlocked situation where no clue could be overlooked no matter how small, Mr. Liu finally decided to pick up the phone and call Hu Fang to inquire. The answer from the other end came through very clearly and decisively, without any hesitation. Hu Fang insisted she had always been in the city working regularly as usual, and in fact over the past few days, she had even gone on an out-of-province trip with colleagues from her company. She emphasized that she absolutely had not met with Liu Jun, nor had she even had any contact with him at all. After hearing this explanation, Mr. Liu could only sigh. Time continued to pass day by day, but Liu Jun remained as if he had evaporated from the face of the earth, leaving no trace. A healthy 24-year-old had vanished without a sound in broad daylight, right before everyone's eyes, without anyone knowing. After many days of tireless searching, an important clue finally emerged. An old school friend of Liu Jun's was carrying a thick stack of missing person flyers with Liu Jun's photo, diligently pasting them one by one on walls along the street. While he was focused on his work, he noticed an elderly peanut vendor sitting by the roadside staring intently at the photo on the flyer, seemingly trying to remember something. When the friend paused, wiped his sweat, and pulled out a cigarette to offer the old man in conversation, the old man slowly spoke, his voice slightly trembling with age. "The person in this photo, I think I've seen him before." The old man struggled to search his memory and recounted in more detail. It was the very night Liu Jun disappeared around 9 p.m. when he was packing up his roasted peanut stand in front of the movie theater to prepare to go home. Suddenly, a young man wearing a face mask covering half his face walked over and asked to buy peanuts. Because of his age and poor hearing, he couldn't hear clearly how much the young man was saying, so the young man gently removed his mask and repeated it once more with a clearer voice. Taking that opportunity, the old man looked carefully at the young man's face a few more times, thinking to himself that this person looked quite sharp and bright, with a kind face. After buying a bag of peanuts, the young man didn't stop but walked straight ahead along the main road, then finally turned into a dark alley between two rows of buildings. The old man remembered that alley very clearly. At night, only one place there had lights on, a small hotel. News of this important clue was quickly relayed to the Liu family. Upon hearing it, Mr. Liu didn't hesitate for even a second and immediately went to that hotel with several relatives. This hotel had 4 floors with simple architecture and had been operating in this area for many years. Business was just average. Not particularly busy, but not exactly deserted either. The person working the front desk when Mr. Liu arrived was the hotel owner's brother-in-law, a young man in his 20s. After Mr. Liu showed Liu Jun's photo and inquired thoroughly, the young man nodded to confirm that on that night, there indeed had been a young man wearing a face mask who entered the hotel. What was noteworthy was that the young man didn't linger long at the front desk, but hurriedly headed straight up the stairs to the upper floors as if going to meet someone who was already waiting in a room. However, when asked for more details like which room number he went to, how long he stayed, when he left the hotel, the desk clerk couldn't answer any of it because he hadn't paid attention to those details at all. Additionally, Mr. Liu looked around and discovered that neither the main lobby nor the hallway floors of the hotel had any visible surveillance cameras installed. The clerk also awkwardly admitted that late at night he had dozed off a few times from sleepiness, only vaguely remembering that around 2 a.m. he didn't see any men coming down past the front desk, but there were several women going in and out during that time period. After asking around and not obtaining any more useful information, Mr. Liu could only leave the hotel disappointed and dejected. But in the professional eyes of the police investigators, things weren't as simple as they appeared on the surface. Analyzing the details they had, police had reason to believe that on the night Liu Jun disappeared, there was a high likelihood he actually did appear at that small hotel. And more importantly, he likely didn't go there alone unexpectedly, but had arranged beforehand to meet someone who was waiting for him in a room. If you looked at Liu Jun's circumstances at that time, a young man who had just gone through the pain of breaking up with his longtime girlfriend, his mood surely in turmoil and complex, possibly still in a phase of both sadness and loneliness, then his meeting someone at night at a hotel like this wasn't too difficult to understand or particularly unusual. Perhaps it was a friend wanting to console him, or even some new relationship. But what was truly strange, what made police especially attentive and concerned, was that after stepping foot into that hotel that night, Liu Jun seemed to vanish without a trace. So the most important question police needed to find an answer to was, that night, in that hotel room, who was waiting for Liu Jun? Recognizing the importance of identifying the person Liu Jun might have met, police immediately proceeded to retrieve all call and text message records from Liu Jun's phone in the days before he disappeared. They hoped from this they could find clues about the identity of the mysterious person. However, the results left everyone on the investigative team stunned and confused. It turned out that during the several days before his disappearance, Liu Jun had no contact whatsoever with strangers or unfamiliar phone numbers. The call and message list on his phone was entirely made up of numbers belonging to family, close friends, and hospital colleagues, all people whom police had already checked and eliminated from the suspect list. It seemed all leads had once again hit a dead end. Just when everyone on the task force was feeling stuck, a small detail suddenly came to light. When scrutinizing the timing of calls more carefully, police discovered that before his disappearance, the last person Liu Jun called was his ex-girlfriend, Hu Fang. The time of that call was recorded as 9:05 p.m. on the fateful day, meaning just a few minutes after Liu Jun told his parents, "I'm going out for a bit," and stepped out the door. This call gave the case a new direction. Police immediately asked Mr. Liu to provide detailed information about Hu Fang. Mr. Liu sighed and began recounting the romantic story of the two young people. They started dating in high school, when one lived in this city and the other in another city, so they maintained a long-distance relationship throughout those years. Later, both were accepted to university and continued their relationship, but over those many years, they had gone through countless breakups and makeups. Finally, over a month earlier, after prolonged tension, the parents from both sides had to sit down together to mediate and find a way to settle things definitively. In the end, they decided to have the two officially break up completely. To have a peaceful ending and also as emotional compensation for the years spent together, Mr. Liu even gave Hu Fang 10,000 yuan, $1,400 in compensation. Hu Fang was a girl with quite a strong personality, with very high possessiveness and exclusivity. But aside from those characteristics, generally speaking, she was a normal, fairly gentle person who spoke little. Moreover, Hu Fang's physique was petite and thin, looking very frail. When it came to the possibility that she could have harmed Liu Jun, he truly didn't dare think of such a thing. However, police with their professionalism still didn't overlook any possibility. They decided to return to the hotel once more to conduct a supplementary investigation. When questioned more thoroughly, the night clerk confirmed that he did vaguely remember a petite woman with a small build coming to rent a room around that time. However, this detail didn't have much value in determining identity, because in southern China, women commonly have petite, small builds like that. It wasn't any distinctive characteristic. Furthermore, when police requested to see the guest registration book, they only saw a scribbled, messy signature written chaotically as if drawing a picture, completely illegible for the name, and more importantly, there was no ID number recorded. Additionally, this hotel didn't have surveillance cameras installed, so there was no footage to cross-reference. A clue that seemed very important and about to lead somewhere once again broke off right from the start. However, no matter how many difficulties there were, the one thing police could confirm for certain was that Liu Jun had called Hu Fang right before he disappeared. And this call was too important a detail to overlook or take lightly. Although the existing evidence was still very limited and not strong enough, based on the clues collected, police still decided to officially summon Hu Fang for questioning. After all, she was the last person Liu Jun had phone contact with before he disappeared without a trace, and this couldn't just be random coincidence. Hu Fang in 2010 was only 25 years old, in the prime of youth. When she received the call from police asking her to come to the station for questioning, she immediately caught a taxi and came right away, her attitude very cooperative. When Hu Fang walked into the office, her appearance surprised quite a few police officers present. Before them was a girl with a very ordinary appearance, even somewhat frail. She was thin and petite, with a slender build, wearing round-framed glasses, with fair, smooth skin, delicate features, and a gentle expression. Overall, she looked exactly like a well-behaved, kind hospital office worker. According to assessments from colleagues who worked with her, she was an extremely serious, meticulous, and careful worker who had never made any mistakes in dispensing medication to patients. Sitting face-to-face with police officers in the interrogation room, Hu Fang displayed an unusually calm demeanor. Her tone was steady, not trembling or hesitant. Her answers to questions were clear and logical, without any signs of panic, anxiety, or evasion typically seen in people involved in cases. When police asked about her whereabouts on the day Liu Jun disappeared, Hu Fang answered naturally. She finished her work shift at 6:30 p.m. as usual, and all colleagues in the pharmacy department could testify to confirm this. She emphasized that currently she lived alone in Shaozhou City for work convenience, while Liu Jun was in Jiahe County, quite far away. With such a geographical distance, she insisted that she couldn't possibly have suddenly traveled from the city to Jiahe County that evening. When police moved on to ask about the phone call between her and Liu Jun that evening, Hu Fang explained in a leisurely and reasonable manner. The two had loved each other for so many years, their feelings deep. Even though they'd broken up now, occasionally calling to check on each other with a few words was normal, nothing to be suspicious about. She spoke in a natural, gentle tone, speaking at a steady, confident pace that was neither too fast nor too slow. But police continued to present an important clue. There was a witness who reported seeing a petite woman with a small build rent a room at the hotel near where Liu Jun was last seen. Hearing this, Hu Fang maintained a calm expression and firmly denied it, insisting that she was absolutely not in Jiahe County that evening, but was in the city as she had stated. To prove her testimony, she even proactively added many details about her schedule in the following days. The next morning, the day after Liu Jun disappeared, she had stomach pain, so requested a half-day off work, then that same afternoon returned to work at the hospital normally. On the third day, she continued recounting, She went on a sightseeing trip with the hospital's youth group, and she was even one of the people directly involved in organizing this trip. The entire journey from departure to return had many colleagues along who could testify to confirm her presence throughout that trip. After hearing Hu Fang's presentation, investigators found that her testimony was very tight and logical. Moreover, every detail about her behavior and activities during those days could be verified through witnesses and concrete evidence. As for motive, they also couldn't find any strong enough reason for Hu Fang to want to harm Liu Jun. Furthermore, Hu Fang had a petite, slender build with a very gentle, timid demeanor. After weighing all these factors, police decided to temporarily remove Hu Fang from the list of main suspects. But an even stranger question immediately arose. The elderly peanut vendor remembered very clearly that on the night Liu Jun disappeared, he did come to that small hotel and was even wearing a face mask in the middle of summer. A doctor, a healthy young man, why would he cover his face for no reason? The only explanation was that he didn't want to be recognized. So who exactly was he going to meet? Why did he have to deliberately hide? The investigation once again seemed pushed into a dead end. In this desperate situation, police decided to search and question everywhere possible, from massage parlors and saunas to bars and nightclubs. To put it bluntly, this was extremely difficult work. No one on the investigative team really dared to hope much for this method, but when there was no other path, they had to try. But life truly is full of surprises. Just when everyone on the task force thought they couldn't find any breakthrough clues for the time being, that the case would remain stuck in deadlock indefinitely, an unexpected turn appeared. A middle-aged taxi driver in his 30s with a worried and anxious expression suddenly showed up at the police station on his own, saying he had just remembered something. The more he thought about it, the more problematic it seemed. The more he thought, the more uneasy and disturbed he felt. And importantly, what he wanted to tell was directly related to the small hotel police were investigating, the very place Liu Jun was last seen. Sitting down in the police office, the driver tried hard to recall. It was on Friday morning of the previous week, when he was driving his empty taxi on the county roads looking for passengers. When his car passed by the small alley leading to that hotel, suddenly, a woman with a petite, small build stepped out from the alley and flagged down his car. He stopped, and she came over to talk. She introduced herself as a university student studying at a school in the city, had stayed in the county a few days, and now wanted to return to school, asking if he was willing to make that long trip. For a hired taxi driver like him, long trips from the county to the city were rare goods, bringing much higher income than short trips around town. So he immediately nodded in cheerful agreement without much thought. The girl then added that her luggage was still left in a hotel room inside the alley and asked him to drive in there, then go upstairs to help her carry the luggage down to the car. As soon as he stepped into the room, the driver immediately smelled a very unusual odor permeating the enclosed space. It was a fishy smell, somewhat like the smell of fresh meat at the market, but somehow stranger, heavier, much more unpleasant. Looking around the room, he saw two large, bright red leather suitcases placed right in the middle, looking quite new and eye-catching. When the girl requested, he tried pushing the two suitcases to move them around the room, finding that pushing them wasn't too difficult. They could slide across the floor. But the real trouble began when he and the girl carried each suitcase down the stairs and tried to lift them to place in the taxi trunk. The very moment he used force to lift the first suitcase, it was incredibly heavy. Heavy beyond imagination. He estimated each suitcase weighed at least 110 to 130 pounds, possibly even more. And what was even more worrying, when he was closer and in direct contact with the suitcase, he realized that strange bloody smell became much more concentrated, as if it was emanating from inside the sealed suitcase itself. Following the natural instinct of a normal person encountering something abnormal, the driver couldn't help but ask the girl, "What's in the suitcase that's so heavy?" The girl answered very naturally, even somewhat casually and offhandedly, "Oh, just books. I'm a student, so I have to carry lots of materials." The driver, though still feeling somewhat doubtful, didn't ask further. After all, both suitcases weighed the same, proving they could really contain books. He struggled to lift both suitcases into the trunk, then drove the girl from the county all the way to the university gate in the city. After returning home to rest in the evening, he went out to the market to buy food for his family. When passing by the meat section, he saw a mutton stall that had just finished slaughtering an animal. The characteristic smell of fresh blood and meat, fishy and heavy, suddenly rushed up into his nose. In that instant, the driver's entire body immediately trembled uncontrollably. This smell was exactly like the strange bloody smell he had smelled from inside those 2 red suitcases that morning. Realizing this, he was so frightened that his whole body broke out in goosebumps, and he immediately ran straight to the police station to report. Police, after hearing the driver's account, recognized the seriousness of the problem and immediately took action. They led the driver back to that small hotel to identify exactly which room he had entered. When they arrived, police opened the door and stepped in, and as soon as they entered the bathroom area, they immediately sensed a very abnormal, foul, fishy smell rising. Although it appeared someone had cleaned and rinsed with water to cover it up, with the experienced eyes of criminal investigators, they knew immediately something was very wrong. A professional forensic team came to the scene for thorough examination. When forensic experts conducted a meticulous inspection, they discovered that in the tiny cracks between the bathroom floor tiles, many dried bloodstains still remained, despite someone's attempts to wash them clean. Not only that, they also found pieces of human tissue still left behind, not completely washed away by water. These tissue fragments, after being sampled and preliminarily analyzed, were confirmed to be human tissue. The scope of blood spatter on the walls and ceiling, along with the condition of the tissue fragments found, all pointed to a horrifying truth. This was the scene of a serious homicide, where extremely brutal acts had occurred that anyone with any investigative experience could immediately recognize. In other words, if Liu Jun had indeed stepped into this room on that fateful night, he had basically encountered danger. Police immediately took out some photos of Hu Fang for the taxi driver to confirm. The driver held up the photo and immediately affirmed, "That's right, that's her. Very similar, I'm certain." He explained further that the two had sat together in the car for nearly 2 hours from the county to the city. Moreover, with all the strange and unusual details he had experienced, he insisted he absolutely couldn't have mistaken the person. However, even as evidence was gradually becoming clearer, some police officers initially still felt hesitant and found it hard to believe. Because murder was already an extremely serious crime, yet dismemberment was even more a horrifying, brutal act to an extent that ordinary people would find very difficult to overcome the psychological barrier to carry out. Could a petite girl like Hu Fang really have enough physical strength, enough courage, and enough mental ruthlessness to be able to do such things? Right at this moment, another important clue appeared. The hotel owner, after being suspected by police of running an illegal operation, was so frightened he finally admitted, actually, the lobby and hallways did have hidden cameras installed, but he stubbornly wouldn't let anyone know. Previously, fearing police would discover prostitution activity, he had removed the cameras, but kept the hard drives with recordings. Now, with a murder case, he didn't dare hide anymore and turned everything over. Police opened the videos to watch, and the entire sequence of events immediately became clear. On the night of the incident, at 9 p.m., a petite woman entered the hotel to register for a room. This person was Hu Fang. 20 minutes later, a young man wearing a face mask entered the hotel, went straight up to the second floor, into room 201. This person was Liu Jun. Next, early the following morning, Hu Fang went in and out of the hotel 4 times. During 2 of those times, she specifically brought back 2 large, brand-new red leather suitcases, exactly as the driver had described. At 9:30 a.m., she flagged down a taxi at the entrance and had the driver carry the 2 red suitcases away. From beginning to end, the camera never recorded any footage of Liu Jun leaving the room. Police simultaneously retrieved location data from Hu Fang's cell phone. On the night of the incident, she was absolutely not in the city, but was active within the county area, completely contradicting her earlier testimony. Combined with supermarket surveillance footage, which happened to capture her buying a meat cleaver and large suitcases, all the clues finally pointed to one conclusion. Liu Jun had been lured out by Hu Fang to meet, and Hu Fang very likely had personally killed her ex-boyfriend, then brutally dismembered him and placed the body in 2 red suitcases to transport elsewhere. The case had completely changed in nature at this point. This wasn't a disappearance. This was a meticulously planned murder with extremely cruel methods. When all the clues had been connected together tightly, police were nearly completely certain that Hu Fang was the main suspect. To prevent the possibility of her discovering she was being watched and fleeing on exactly the 6th day since Liu Jun's disappearance, the task force decided to go directly to Hu Fang's workplace, restrain her immediately, and bring her back to the police station for formal interrogation. In the first interrogation, Hu Fang still displayed a stubborn attitude, firmly denying guilt to the end. She repeated like a mantra, "I don't know where he went. I didn't meet him that night at all." She spoke with police as if participating in a television interview, very natural and calm. Police began presenting concrete evidence one by one. Video footage from the hotel cameras, the taxi driver's detailed testimony about driving her and 2 abnormally heavy suitcases, images from supermarket cameras recording her buying a meat cleaver and large red suitcases, all printed out, enlarged and placed right in front of her, undeniable. But Hu Fang still wouldn't surrender. She either said she didn't remember clearly, her memory was hazy, or used the excuse of being embarrassed and ashamed, not wanting to admit the private matter of arranging to meet and rent a room with her ex-boyfriend to cover up and conceal. As for important physical evidence like blood in the bathroom, the 2 red suitcases, the meat cleaver, she denied everything to the end. The situation remained deadlocked until police decided to play their final trump card. After Hu Fang got out of the first taxi driver's car at the university gate in the city, she didn't stop there but called another pickup truck, hired that driver to take her along with the 2 heavy red suitcases to continue on to an abandoned house in the suburban outskirts. This entire movement trajectory had been traced by police through traffic camera systems and the pickup driver's testimony. Hearing this, Hu Fang's attitude suddenly changed completely. Instead of being tense, she seemed relieved, breathing a sigh. She no longer tried to struggle to deny the charges. With a voice full of exhaustion, but also strangely calm, she said, "I knew this day would come. From the moment I did that, I knew I couldn't escape forever." After that, she appeared willing to cooperate, agreeing to disclose the exact location where she had hidden Liu Jun's body in that abandoned house. However, she still firmly insisted and emphasized one thing. This was entirely a private grudge between 2 people. She recounted that she had liked Liu Jun since middle school, and in high school would secretly put fruit in his backpack every day. When both went to university and had a long-distance relationship, she became pregnant multiple times and had to have abortions, even bearing almost all of his living expenses for a long period. She admitted she had extremely strong possessiveness, frequently checking his phone, scolding female friends close to him, even going to the hospital out of jealousy to scold the head nurse, pushing Liu Jun to the point where he completely couldn't take it anymore. The final breakup, in her anger, she demanded 10,000 yuan, $1,400, from him as a breakup fee, just wanting to test whether he would try to hold on or soften. But Liu Jun immediately agreed to give the money. In her eyes, that action was no different from, "He wanted to use money to drive me away." All the accumulated resentment and hatred finally converged into one terrifying thought. If I can't have him, then no one else should have him either. On the night of the incident, the evening of July 21, 2010, after finishing her shift, Hu Fang traveled from Shaozhou City to Jiahe County and rented a room at a small hotel. She called Liu Jun, lying that she had helped him register for a medical certification exam and told him to come pick up his admission ticket. Liu Jun believed her and came. When he entered the room, Hu Fang again brought up wanting to get back together, but Liu Jun still firmly refused. To persuade him to stay, she lied, "Let's be together one last time, then we'll break up peacefully." In other words, one last time in bed together. Liu Jun agreed, but to Hu Fang, that agreement became a delusion. She thought that if they could still sleep together, it meant there was still hope to rekindle their relationship. After that intimate encounter, Liu Jun's attitude remained as firm as before. And it was at that exact moment that Hu Fang's psychology completely collapsed. Afterward, Hu Fang took out 20 sleeping pills she had prepared beforehand, crushed them, and poured them into a milk carton. She testified that initially she planned to drink it herself, but because Liu Jun was thirsty, he grabbed it and drank it all in one gulp. Ironically, before the drugs took effect, the two were intimate once more. After the second time, the drugs began to take effect, and Liu Jun quickly fell into a deep coma. At this point, emotions in Hu Fang exploded. She initially used her hands to cover his mouth and nose, found it ineffective, and then used a pillow and blanket to cover his head tightly, but could still sense breathing. Finally, she yanked the cord used to tie the blanket cover and tightened it hard around Liu Jun's neck. Under the effect of the sedatives, Liu Jun only resisted weakly for a few seconds before becoming completely motionless. Hu Fang admitted she held the body and cried for a moment, but very quickly after that, fear rose up. In the summer heat, the body would decompose very quickly. If discovered, she would certainly be finished. And so, survival instinct crushed all remaining emotions. The first time she left the room was around midnight, probably to buy tools. But it was too late. All stores in the county were closed, so she returned to the room. After 5 a.m., she went out again and bought a large meat cleaver and a large suitcase. She dragged Liu Jun's body into the bathroom, using medical knowledge to determine how to cut at the joints. And she was only 4 feet 11 inches tall. That such physical strength and psychological endurance could accomplish this, even police found hard to imagine. She then discovered one suitcase wasn't enough, so she rinsed off briefly and went out again to buy a second suitcase. Not until 9:30 a.m., as shown in the camera footage, did she finish packing the 2 red suitcases and check out to leave. To avoid investigation, she switched taxis twice in succession, finally reaching the abandoned house in the suburbs, hiding the 2 suitcases in the dilapidated building, stacking bricks to cover them. She then discarded the murder weapon and cleaver in a remote garbage pile, even burning some items. After that, she calmly returned to work at the hospital. She used Liu Jun's phone to send a leave request text to the department head, then turned it off. On the 3rd day, she went on the trip with the hospital group, and even deliberately used Liu Jun's phone to send a text to his father. "I'm very tired," creating the illusion that Liu Jun's mood was declining, that he might have run away or done something foolish. Finally, she threw the phone and clothes into a lake at the tourist area. Following her directions, police excavated the body parts buried under bricks in the abandoned house in the suburbs, along with traces of burned plastic bags, remaining murder weapons, and other evidence. Everything matched perfectly with the cameras, bloodstains, and DNA tests collected earlier. The chain of evidence was completely closed. At this point, this case of murder, dismemberment, and body disposal stemming from a romantic dispute had no more doubts whatsoever. After the Liu Jun murder case was solved, Hu Fang was prosecuted according to law. On August 25, 2011, the Shaozhou Intermediate Court issued its first instance verdict. Hu Fang was guilty of intentional homicide and sentenced to death with a 2-year reprieve, with restrictions on commutation. The court held that although the case was brutal, it arose from a romantic dispute, and the subjective malice and degree of danger to society were relatively low. Additionally, relatives had paid partial compensation on her behalf, so they decided to temporarily not carry out the death sentence immediately. The court also ordered Hu Fang to compensate Liu Jun's family a total of 349,000 yuan, approximately $49,000. But this verdict was difficult for the victim's family to accept. Less than a month later, Liu Jun's family posted online, questioning the sentence as too light, emphasizing that after committing the crime, Hu Fang had calmly gone on a trip with colleagues, even lied about being pregnant to request bail, and had never said a word of apology or consolation to the victim's family. The family authorized lawyers to appeal to the provincial court. Hu Fang herself also appealed, claiming she hadn't premeditated and requesting leniency. After public attention, on October 24, 2011, the Shaozhou Intermediate Court publicly responded online, emphasizing that the suspended death sentence was based on judicial policy of being cautious in applying the death penalty and was not influenced externally. However, the Shaozhou City Procuratorate believed the original sentence was too light and decided to protest the verdict. On April 25, 2012, the Provincial Procuratorate officially supported the protest opinion, pointing out that Hu Fang stubbornly refused to confess and showed no attitude of good confession. The methods of the crime were extremely cruel, the consequences were particularly serious, the original sentence was clearly inadequate. The case entered appeal. In May 2012, the provincial court held a hearing in Shaozhou. At trial, Hu Fang changed her testimony again, even claiming the dismemberment wasn't from hate but from love, saying that when Liu Jun was alive, he wanted to see Dongjiang Lake, so she took him to see it one last time. This argument was quickly refuted by the prosecutor. From the crime scene to Dongjiang Lake was much closer than the body disposal site. Why would she take a roundabout route to dispose of the body? How to explain that? Hu Fang couldn't say anything. Finally, the Provincial Procurator's opinion was accepted. On August 24, 2012, the Hunan Provincial High Court issued its final verdict, overturning the sentencing portion of the first instance verdict, changing it to sentence Hu Fang to death. At this point, the hotel murder and dismemberment case that shocked the local area finally closed after 2 years. And that's the case for today. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.